Hello, welcome to this session on Doctrine of Ideas, Forms. Plato was a famous and most influential Greek philosopher. He was the successor and pupil of Socrates. One of his most important contributions to philosophy is the theory of ideas. It is considered as the original contribution of Plato, which influenced many philosophers. Plato, as the successor of Socrates, developed the ideas of his master and compiled the works of the great master in the forms of dialogues. Plato was a philosopher, dialectician, poet, and mystic. Socrates wrote nothing. His thoughts are the product of his conversation with people, and it is known to us wholly from the writing of others, especially Plato. The works of Plato are commonly referred to Socratic. After the trial and death of Socrates, Plato moved from Athens and he traveled across many places like Egypt, Asia Minor, Italy, and many other places. He visited Pythagoras and Dionysius. He was the founder of the school, the academy in the groves of Academus in 380s BC. Great mathematicians like Theaetetus and Eudoxus were also associated and worked with his academy. Aristotle and Plato differ from each other in terms of their basic concept of reality. For Plato, the highest value of everything is good, and it resides in the form of concept or ideas, whereas for Aristotle, it is the good of human beings and it is very real. Plato was in search of creating his ideal state, and he taught many things including mathematics and different branches of philosophy in his academy. Plato's works are mainly in the form of dialogues. Socrates as the central character in dialogues, Plato discusses philosophical questions with other characters. There are around 35 dialogues, 13 letters attributed to him. The most commonly accepted ordering of dialogues are as follows: first period, Charmides, Laches, Euthyphro, Hippias Major, Meno. Second period, Cratylus, Symposium, Phaedo, Republic, Phaedrus, Parmenides, Theaetetus. Third period, Sophistus, Politicus. Fourth period, Timaeus, Critias, Philebus. Seventh letter, Laws. Plato's philosophical problem. Plato developed a system of thought in which universals or forms or ideas are the higher order of reality than world of objects. Plato divided his thought into logic or dialectic, metaphysics, ethics, and politics. The period of Plato and Aristotle are also known as the age of great systems, because in such a period philosophy began to flourish as a systematic discipline. Later, the system-building tendency of traditional philosophy was very much criticized by later philosophers. Plato's philosophy included many of his predecessors' thoughts. He shared the skepticism of the sophist on the matter of knowledge of appearances. He accepted Socrates' idea of genuine knowledge as concepts, Heraclitus' idea of universal flux or becoming, Parmenides' concept of being as unchanging essence, Atomists' conception of plurality of atoms, Anaxagoras' perception of mind as a dynamic, and finally the basic underlying principle of Greek philosophy. The philosophical position of Plato is very much critically read by his successors. Plato's school of thought was a great influence on later development of philosophy. One of the major influences of his thought is his pupil Aristotle. Plato's thought influenced Christian theology. The medieval period is basically the period of scholasticism, where Plato and Aristotle were two major sources of philosophical treasure house. The great scholar of Christian theology, like Saint Augustine, was influenced by Plato. Not only in Middle Ages, his thought remains as a vital force to contemporary thought itself. Contemporary French thinker Emmanuel Levinas is well known through his writings on ethics. His thoughts owe his precedence in Plato's idea of good. A Platonic version of idea of good exists as a strong pillar in his works and philosophy. Platonism had a profound effect on Western thought, and many Platonic notions were adopted by the Christianity during Middle Ages, especially in the works and philosophy of Saint Augustine. Neoplatonism is another school of thought during the 3rd century. They used the works of Plato and later Platonists to develop their school of thought. Doctrine of ideas. For Plato, the function of philosophy is to understand the inner order and connections of the universe and understands its essence through reason. Theory of ideas is considered as an important original contribution of Plato to philosophy. This theory is logical and metaphysical. All other thoughts of Plato have their inner connection with this basic idea. It is also known as the theory of forms or universals. The theory simply states that the world that appears to our senses is the imperfect copy of the original, and there is a real perfect realm which is the source of everything that we experience. These are known as forms. They are eternal, changeless, and basic structure of the world. According to Plato, particulars have a common name and they also have a common idea or form. It is just like the reflections on mirror. The reflection is only apparent and the reality is the real object. All conceptual and empirical things have their universal forms such as beauty, goodness, justice, unity, and equality. From these ideas, things receive their names and corresponding characteristics according to their degree of participation in their universals. There is a great variety of forms, class of things, qualities, relations, values, actions, ideas of table, beds, chairs, of smallness, greatness, likeness, of colors, orders, and tones, of health, rest and motion, of beauty, truth, and goodness. For Plato, the essence of things consists in their universal forms. Ideas or forms are not mere thoughts in the minds of man or even in the mind of God. Indeed, the divine thought is itself directed towards them and it is independent of any knowing mind. Forms or ideas are defined as the objects corresponding to abstract concepts. Concepts are real entities. Ideas are separate realm of entities different from particulars. They are superior to particulars. Forms are realities and particulars are mere appearances or copies of the original. Forms are existing for themselves. It has the character of sustainability. They are real or substantial forms. They are original, eternal, transcendent archetypes of things. They exist prior to things which they are subject to. Ideas or forms exist independently of anything else and also stay unaffected by any change. Plato stated that forms belong to a realm of abstract entities. They are separable from concrete or particulars in space and time. The separation of forms and their particulars are commonly referred to as Platonic dualism. That is the separation between ideals and world of objects. Forms are superior to particulars in degree of reality and value. They are the true realities and particulars are mere appearance. The objects of the world or what we perceive are imperfect copies of the eternal form. Particulars may come and go, but the form or idea remain the same, unaffected by flux. There are many objects of the same idea, but there is only one idea of a class of things. Forms are non-temporal, non-spatial, and they are eternal and immutable. Ideas are well ordered and create a system of unity, though numberless, they are not chaotic. All ideas are arranged in an organic unity, a logical order. They create a rational cosmos. They are archetypes. All ideas are subsumed under a highest idea, that is good. The idea of good is supreme and beyond which there is no other idea. The idea of good is the cosmic purpose. According to Plato, the universe is a logical system of ideas, and it is governed by supreme idea of good. It is the universal purpose and at the same time a rational whole. The idea of good cannot be grasped by the senses, and what we perceive is the imperfect reflection of the good. The relation between universal form and its particular is due participation. The degree of reality of particular is due to the participation of it in their corresponding universal. Reality as opposed to appearances is completely and perfectly good. To perceive the good is equal to perceive reality. The knowledge gained through senses is opinion, doxa for Plato. Opinion is of the world presented to the senses. It is concerned with particular things. They cannot have the status of knowledge until these are molded by philosophical reasoning. To get genuine knowledge, that is episteme, one must know the eternal, unchanging essence of things, namely the forms or ideas or universals. For instance, opinion is concerned with particular beautiful things, but knowledge is concerned with beauty in itself. Plato's theory of knowledge is summarized in his work Republic, and it is divided into 4 segments. Each represents different levels of knowledge. The lowest level contains sensuous knowledge, that is shadows and reflections. The second contains belief and knowledge of sensible objects. The third contains mathematical knowledge, and the last segment is the highest segment that represents rational insight, the object of which are the forms or ideas. The world of intellect is distinct from the world of senses. Intellect and sense perception are divided into 2 kinds, in which reason and understanding are 2 kinds of intellect. Among these 2 kinds of intellects, reason is higher than the faculty of understanding. It is concerned with pure ideas, and the method of which is attained through dialectic. The faculty of understanding is inferior to reason, and it is used in mathematical knowledge. The method of dialectic leads to the perception of the absolute good. The assumption is that reality opposed to appearance and is completely and perfectly good. To perceive the good means to perceive the reality. The allegory of the cave. Plato explains the allegory of the cave in his Republic. The analogy held that people who spend the whole life in a cave can only see the shadows on the wall where they live. They can't see the real images of things. They can understand things only with the images that are available to them as shadows. They may come and go on the wall. The real things that exist and move outside the cave, but they don't have any perception to those who are inside the cave, but have only the experience of shadows. According to Plato, the same thing happens to us in the matter of reality of forms. What we see or experience is only the reflection of the original universals. Compared to the reality of form, physical objects and events are similar to only those shadows in the cave. According to Plato, those who are not enlightened in philosophy may be compared to prisoners in a cave. The prisoners in a cave can look into one direction of the cave because they are bounded. They have fire behind them and a wall in front. Between fire and wall there is nothing. They are familiar to see shadows of themselves. Objects behind them are cast on the wall by the light of the fire. They regard these shadows as real because they don't have any sensation prior to this, have no notion of the objects to which they are due. At last, some man succeeded in escaping from the cave to the light of the sun. For the first time he sees real things. He understands that for all the time he was deceived by shadows. According to Plato, the man is similar to a philosopher who has the responsibility to go back to the cave and make the other fellow prisoners let know the things we perceive in the wall, and they are deceived by the unreal perception. Real things exist outside the cave. Plato's theory of ideas possesses a unique philosophy with logical and metaphysical content, but it commits a number of fallacies. Universal man is the name of the pattern man created by the God. When compared to actual man or particular man, are imperfect and somewhat unreal copies. He failed to realize how the gap between universal and corresponding particulars, the relation between the ideas and the corresponding things, lead to an infinite regress in the way individual man and the type man exist in an ideal relation. This criticism is commonly referred to as the third man's argument. The continuation of the argument requires a fourth and a fifth man and is raised by Aristotle to explain about the inexplicability of Plato's theory of ideas. Now, let me move on to summarize the session. Plato compiled the dialogues of his master Socrates. He was one of the well-known thinkers in the Greek philosophy. He wrote many letters and dialogues. Through his writings, Plato explored the thoughts of Socrates even though he wrote nothing. Plato's famous dialogues are Symposium, Phaedo, Republic, Parmenides, Theaetetus, and Meno. The dialogues reflect his philosophy. The theory of ideas is considered as one of his important contributions to philosophy. Plato says that the world of ideas are real and particulars we experience are imitation or copies of forms. To explain the reality of things and appearances, Plato gives the allegory of cave. The analogy says that people who spend the whole life in a cave can only see the shadows on the wall where they live. They cannot see the real images of things. They can understand things only with the images that are available to them as shadows that come and go on the wall. The real things that exist and move outside the cave, and they don't have any perception to the same. Just like the same ideas are independent forms of reality and they are eternal and immutable, whereas particulars are the copies of such eternal forms. Now, you may please try to answer some questions. First one, prepare a short biographical sketch of Plato. Second one, write a note on Plato's major dialogues. Third, discuss the major themes and ideas of theory of forms. Fourth, critically analyze Plato's concept of universal and its relation to particulars. Fifth, what are the important points of Plato's allegory of the cave? Sixth, discuss the contributions of Plato to philosophy as a system builder. 7. Give a short description of Plato's division of hierarchy of sciences in Republic. Books for further reference. A History of Philosophy, Volume 1 by Frederick Copleston, The Newman Press, Westminster, 1950. The Greek Philosophers from Thales to Aristotle by W. Casey Guthrie, Routledge, London. The Cambridge Companion to Plato, edited by Richard Crout, Cambridge University Press, Cambridge, 1995. History of Western Philosophy by Bertrand Russell, Routledge, London, 1991. A History of Western Philosophy by Frank Thilly, Central Publishing House, Allahabad, 1984. Well, thank you for watching today's program. Hope this session was enriching. Goodbye.